The Zetharian dominion had seen countless worlds fall beneath their heel, each conquest more efficient than the last. As their massive fleet descended upon Earth, Supreme Commander Zal peered out from the bridge of his flagship with cold, calculated satisfaction. Earth was just another backwater planet, another step in their march of galactic domination. Zal's confidence swelled as he watched the blue-green orbs spin beneath them. To him, humans were nothing but primitive creatures, unworthy of real notice. As the invasion began, Earth's skies darkened with the shadows of Zetharian warships. Sleek, metallic behemoths cut through the atmosphere, their advanced weaponry primed and ready. Initial assaults struck major cities, toppling infrastructure in mere moments. To the Zetharians, this was the beginning of the end, a swift and decisive show of force meant to cripple the human spirit. But the expected surrender never came. Instead, humans responded with resistance, not with the conventional military might that Zal anticipated, but something far more unpredictable. In the heart of a smoldering city, civilians, untrained, ordinary people, took up arms in the most unexpected ways. A construction crane, commandeered by a team of desperate workers, swung wildly through the air, its heavy hooks slamming into a Zetharian war mech, sending the towering machine crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks and debris. In another corner of the city, civilians gathered drones, cheap, recreational devices, and reprogrammed them. One by one, the small machines took flight, buzzing through the air with surprising speed and agility. Armed with makeshift explosives, the drones became kamikaze weapons, diving straight into the enemy's ranks. Explosions lit up the skies as alien soldiers scrambled to defend themselves from the sudden onslaught. Zal's brow furrowed as he received reports from his ground forces. There was an oddity in the humans' response. They weren't using military tactics alone. They were using everything. A farmer had apparently driven his tractor straight into an alien patrol, flipping an armored transport over in the process. A group of schoolteachers had barricaded themselves in a building and used kitchen knives to fend off invading troops. Even the very ground seemed to fight against the Zetharians as human engineers redirected underground sewer systems, flooding enemy bunkers and cutting off their escape routes. For the first time, Zal felt something gnaw at him, a sliver of unease. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. He had expected quick, clean efficiency, not this chaos. On the outskirts of a city, a group of human resistance fighters prepared for yet another wave of invaders. Among them was Sarah, a former engineer turned reluctant leader. Her sharp mind had already devised dozens of unconventional traps and countermeasures, each one more ingenious than the last. Around her were civilians, shopkeepers, students, retirees, each clutching some improvised weapon. Some held makeshift spears crafted from metal pipes, others had repurposed construction tools. The group watched from their vantage point as a squad of alien soldiers advanced. Their sleek armor shimmered in the sunlight, but Sarah saw beyond their intimidating appearance. She had studied their patterns, their weaknesses. "Wait!" she whispered, her voice low but commanding. The resistance fighters crouched low, their breaths shallow. They waited until the alien squad was directly beneath the building they had fortified. Then, with a signal from Sarah, they released their trap. A swarm of kitchen appliances, microwaves, blenders, toasters, rigged with explosives, plummeted from above. The crude bombs detonated upon impact, sending shockwaves through the streets and scattering the alien soldiers in disarray. From his command center, Zal received yet another troubling report. His forces were facing losses at an alarming rate, not because of the humans' military, but because of their relentless improvisation. There were accounts of beehives being weaponized, entire swarms unleashed upon unsuspecting troops. Even Earth's volatile environment was used against them, volcanic vents harnessed to scorch enemy landing zones, dense forests turned into ambush sites where traps lay hidden beneath every leaf and branch. Zal's fist clenched. This was supposed to be easy. Humans were supposed to be inferior. But they weren't fighting like any other species the Zetharians had encountered. They were using everything, every scrap of material, every piece of their environment, every ounce of their ingenuity, to turn the tide. He could feel his control over the invasion slipping, and with it, the certainty of victory. Despite the initial blows humanity had suffered, Earth was not yielding. The humans refused to lay down their arms, refused to submit. And worse still, they were adapting faster than Zal had anticipated. What started as chaotic resistance was now evolving into a coordinated defense, with every city, every town, every village becoming its own fortress. In the ruins of a toppled building, a group of survivors had fashioned an array of defenses. They had wired the remains of streetlights into shock traps and set up slingshots to launch makeshift projectiles, everything from bricks to sharpened pieces of metal. Zal's troops, for all their advanced technology, were struggling to counter these unpredictable, low-tech tactics. He had expected a quick subjugation. Instead, he was watching as the human spirit, that indomitable will to survive, rose in defiance of his mighty empire. The humans, it seemed, would not be so easily conquered. Supreme Commander Zal paced the command center of his warship, his calm demeanor slowly eroding as reports poured in from across the planet. The invasion was no longer proceeding as smoothly as it had in the early hours. His forces were being bogged down, not by a coordinated military response but by something far more disorienting. Humans, the supposedly primitive species, were not just defending their cities and towns, they were doing it in ways that defied all logic. Everything around them had become a weapon, from the smallest household objects to the very landscape itself. The alien ground forces, heavily equipped with advanced technology, were now facing an enemy that didn't play by the rules. Zal's soldiers, used to overwhelming their opponents with sheer firepower, found themselves in constant disarray. Their armor and energy shields, designed to withstand laser blasts and plasma weapons, offered little protection against the barrage of everyday items humans turned against them. In a quiet rural town, a group of farmers stood their ground. Alien tanks rumbled through fields, their powerful cannons primed for destruction. But before they could fire, a farmer charged, driving his tractor straight into the flank of one of the tanks. The sheer force of the impact knocked it off balance, flipping the heavy machine onto its side. Nearby, another group of farmers had rigged a series of water irrigation systems with fuel, turning what should have been harmless sprinklers into crude flamethrowers. The alien troops, disoriented by the unfamiliar terrain and overwhelmed by the unexpected ferocity of the attack, retreated in chaos. Zal watched in disbelief as his holographic map of Earth lit up with markers indicating human resistance. They weren't supposed to be this formidable. His intelligence reports had predicted a swift, efficient campaign. Instead, his forces were now fighting in every corner of the globe, encountering resistance in forms they had never imagined. The alien high command was growing frustrated. Zal's generals, once confident in their superiority, now struggled to make sense of the battlefield reports. They were used to fighting advanced civilizations with predictable military strategies, not a species that could weaponize anything. One general, with an air of irritation, described how a group of human engineers had hacked into a squadron of zarian drones, reprogramming them to attack their own forces. It was a humiliating loss of control, one that gnawed at the disciplined minds of the alien commanders. Back on Earth, Sarah and her group of resistance fighters had grown bolder. Each day brought new challenges, but with them, new solutions. They had scavenged parts from alien wreckage, repurposing the invaders' own technology against them. An alien hovercraft had been brought down by a carefully placed net of metal cables, and within hours, the humans had dismantled it, using the parts to create makeshift explosives and weapons. Sarah's expertise in engineering became invaluable. She had a knack for understanding how things worked, even alien technology, and soon her team was launching guerrilla-style attacks that crippled the enemy's movements. A simple sewer system in the heart of the city became a death trap for Zetharian soldiers as her team dropped explosives through manholes, sending shockwaves through the streets and collapsing sections of road on top of alien patrols. What once was a bustling urban area had become a battlefield where every piece of the environment was turned into a weapon. In the forests, the Zetharians tried to regroup, attempting to use their advanced sensors to track human resistance fighters. But even nature itself seemed to work against them. Human forces had turned the dense woods into a labyrinth of traps. Hunters, familiar with the terrain, set up snares and tripwires that led alien soldiers into ambushes. Homemade bombs, crafted from everyday materials, were hidden beneath layers of leaves and brush, waiting for an unsuspecting footstep to trigger them. Zal's frustration mounted. He had expected to face a technologically inferior enemy, one that would fall in line with the others his empire had crushed. But the humans, for all their primitive weapons and outdated technology, had something far more dangerous: adaptability. They turned every setback into an opportunity, every piece of their world into an asset. And worst of all, they were learning. Each failed invasion attempt by his forces was met with a counterattack more ingenious than the last. His once invincible army, now trapped in a war of attrition, was growing demoralized. Alien soldiers, hardened by countless battles across the galaxy, had never encountered a species that fought like this. They had expected to dominate the battlefield, but instead they found themselves on the defensive, constantly adapting to the humans' unpredictable tactics. And it wasn't just the rural areas or forests. In the heart of the cities, humanity was turning the very fabric of urban life against the invaders. Civilians, once terrified, now banded together, using anything they could get their hands on. Scrap metal was sharpened into makeshift spears. Old tires, soaked in gasoline, became rolling infernos hurled at enemy vehicles. Even the towering skyscrapers, symbols of human achievement, became part of the war effort. Elevator shafts were rigged to drop debris onto alien squads below. Construction cranes, once used to build the city, now swung massive steel beams to smash through Zetharian assault mechs. Reports came in from across the globe of humans using animals in ways that Zal could scarcely believe. Beehives, knocked from trees, unleashed swarms of angry bees on unsuspecting alien patrols. Herds of cattle were deliberately driven into enemy camps, causing confusion and chaos as the massive animals stampeded through their ranks. The very environment of Earth, its unpredictable weather, its wildlife, had become an ally in the human resistance. Zal's composure was cracking. Each day that passed without victory felt like a personal failure. His empire, the Zetharian Dominion, had prided itself on its efficiency, on the cold, calculated precision of its conquests. But now, faced with the unpredictable ingenuity of humanity, they were faltering. What had begun as a straightforward invasion was devolving into a nightmare of improvisation and chaos. He stared at the latest reports, his fists clenched. He couldn't understand how a species so inferior in every measurable way could be holding its own against the might of his army. This wasn't supposed to happen. Earth was supposed to fall. But it hadn't. And the humans showed no signs of giving up. As his frustration grew, so did his sense of unease. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were thriving in this chaos. Each day, they seemed to become more dangerous, more unpredictable. And for the first time in his long career, Supreme Commander Zal began to doubt whether he could win this war. The Zetharians, having failed to break the human resistance through brute force, turned to their ultimate weapon. From the command ship, Zal ordered the deployment of an energy disruptor designed to cripple Earth's power grid. His strategy was simple: plunge the planet into darkness, cut off communication and logistics, and force humanity into submission through chaos. The device would render all electronic systems useless, leaving Earth's defenders scattered and powerless. Zal believed that without their technology, the humans would be easily crushed. The disruptor was launched, and soon, massive pulses of energy rippled across the globe. Cities that had still been humming with life moments before now stood in eerie silence as lights flickered and died. Communication systems went down, transportation halted, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though Zal had succeeded. The chaos he sought began to unfold, as confusion gripped the human population. But what Zal had failed to anticipate was that humans had always thrived in adversity. Darkness didn't deter them, it only fueled their determination. The humans quickly adapted to the new reality, falling back on methods of warfare that required no modern technology. In the blackout, the Zetharians found themselves facing something even more dangerous than they had before: humans armed with nothing but ingenuity and primal resourcefulness. Resistance fighters like Sarah, who had been relying on technology to aid their fight, seamlessly transitioned to low-tech guerrilla warfare. With no drones to rely on and no electrical systems to hack, they fell back on ancient tactics that had been refined over millennia. The humans didn't need sophisticated technology to fight. Anything in their hands became a tool for survival. In the streets of major cities, people began using fire as their weapon of choice. Molotov cocktails, constructed from the simplest materials, were hurled at alien vehicles and troop formations. Improvised explosives, made from household chemicals, were placed in strategic locations, turning the once peaceful city into a deadly maze for the invaders. With no lights to guide them, Zetharian soldiers stumbled through the streets, disoriented and vulnerable, easy prey for the humans lying in wait. Sarah's team had found an abandoned warehouse, where they spent hours dismantling everything they could find. Old appliances were broken down for parts, wires stripped and twisted into traps, while barrels of fuel were repurposed into makeshift bombs. The lack of power didn't slow them down, it only pushed them to become more creative, more ruthless. What had started as an invasion was quickly becoming a full-blown war of attrition, with humans proving far more resilient than the Zetharians had ever imagined. In the rural areas, the blackout was barely noticed. Many of the farmers and small-town residents had already been relying on basic tools and machinery. Without power, they turned to simple but deadly means of defense. Pitchforks, axes, and even sharpened sticks became weapons against the invaders. Livestock was used as a means of disruption, and bonfires lit up the night sky, serving as signals for human resistance fighters spread out across vast distances. The Zetharians, unable to rely on their energy-based weapons in the blackout, had been forced into close combat. But here, in the dark, they were completely outmatched. The humans moved silently through familiar terrain, using their knowledge of the environment to their advantage. Each night brought new attacks, as alien camps were raided by groups of fighters armed with little more than sharpened metal, stones, and fire. Zal, from his command ship in orbit, watched as his most advanced weapon failed to deliver the decisive victory he had counted on. He had expected humanity to crumble without their technology, but instead, they had only grown more dangerous. His forces were being picked apart, not by an organized army but by a species that refused to die. His frustration boiled over as the reports from his commanders grew increasingly dire. Supplies were dwindling, morale was plummeting, and his soldiers, once confident and disciplined, were now terrified of the humans lurking in the dark. Meanwhile, Sarah's team had come up with a bold plan. They had managed to salvage enough alien technology to attempt a daring raid on the Zetharian command ship. It was risky, bordering on suicidal, but it was the kind of plan that humans excelled at: high risk, high reward, with everything on the line. Using a combination of scavenged alien tech and Earth materials, they had built an explosive device powerful enough to take out the ship's core reactor. The group knew they wouldn't get another chance. With the blackout still in effect, they had a narrow window of opportunity before the Zetharians re-established their control over Earth's systems. Armed with nothing but their wits, makeshift weapons, and the salvaged tech, Sarah and her team embarked on the raid. The tension was palpable as they made their way to the launch site, avoiding Zetharian patrols and navigating through the decimated landscape. They knew that once aboard the ship, there would be no turning back. Everything hinged on this one final push: either they succeeded in taking down the Zetharian mothership, or humanity's fight would end in defeat. Zal, unaware of the looming threat, continued to issue orders from the safety of his ship. He was planning his next move, trying to find a way to regain control of the situation on the ground. But even in his most paranoid moments, he could not have predicted that the humans would strike at the heart of his invasion force. As Sarah and her team breached the ship's defenses, they were met with resistance from Zetharian soldiers. But by now, the aliens were fighting from a place of fear, not confidence. The humans moved swiftly through the corridors, using their familiarity with guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the enemy. The alien technology, so advanced and powerful, was no match for the brutal efficiency of Earth's defenders in close quarters. The final moments of the raid were a blur of explosions and gunfire. Sarah's team fought their way to the core, planting the explosive device with only seconds to spare. The ship's alarms blared, and panic spread through the Zetharian crew. They had never imagined that the humans would be capable of breaching their most secure stronghold. As Sarah and her team made their escape, the ship shuddered under the force of the explosion. The core reactor went critical, sending shockwaves through the ship and into space. Zal, realizing too late what had happened, watched in horror as the command ship began to tear itself apart. In the end, it wasn't the energy disruptor or advanced technology that determined the outcome of the battle. It was humanity's refusal to surrender, their ability to turn even the simplest tools into weapons of war, and their relentless drive to survive at any cost. With the Zetharian command ship in ruins and supreme commanders all dead, the remaining alien forces were left leaderless and disoriented. The explosion had ripped through the flagship, not only crippling the fleet's command structure but also demoralizing the entire invasion force. The Zetharians, once so sure of their superiority, now found themselves scrambling for survival. Their communication was in disarray, their weapons malfunctioning in the wake of the blackout, and their morale shattered by the human resistance that had refused to be broken. On the ground, the impact of the victory was immediate. Across Earth, humans who had been fighting desperately with improvised weapons and sheer determination saw the alien invaders falter. Without central command, Zetharian units became disorganized, vulnerable, and easier to pick off. What had once been a coordinated onslaught was now a scattered, panicked retreat. Humans, sensing the shift, pressed the advantage. Resistance groups, once on the defensive, now went on the offensive. In the cities, civilians and soldiers alike united to clear the remaining Zetharian forces. Makeshift barricades that had been used to defend against the initial invasion were now converted into launching points for counterattacks. Human ingenuity turned every corner of the urban landscape into a trap for the aliens. Streets became funnels for ambushes, and buildings were rigged with explosives to collapse on Zetharian troops. With the humans' growing momentum, the once feared invaders became sitting ducks, unable to defend themselves from the relentless guerrilla tactics they faced. Sarah, now recognized as a leader of the resistance, rallied her team for one final push. With the command ship destroyed, their focus shifted to driving out the remaining Zetharian ground forces. They knew the key to finishing the battle lay in taking down the last of the major strongholds the aliens had set up. These outposts were scattered across the globe, each one housing what was left of the Zetharians' heavy artillery and advanced weaponry. But humanity had learned quickly. Using captured alien technology, Sarah's team coordinated with other resistance cells worldwide, sharing intelligence and strategies. The human ability to adapt alien tech for their own use had become their greatest asset. Engineers, hackers, and scientists worked tirelessly to repurpose captured Zetharian drones, weapons, and communication devices. Within days, Earth's resistance forces had turned the invaders' own machines against them. Sarah's plan was straightforward: strike at the remaining strongholds simultaneously, using their own adapted technology to overwhelm the alien defenses. With limited resources and malfunctioning equipment, the Zetharians wouldn't stand a chance against the coordinated assault. Her team's knowledge of both Earth's terrain and the aliens' weaknesses allowed them to plan each attack meticulously, ensuring maximum impact with minimum risk. As the strikes began, the tide of the war shifted decisively in humanity's favor. In one region, a Zetharian base in the middle of a forest was engulfed in flames as resistance fighters set fire to the surrounding area, using the natural environment as both a weapon and cover. The aliens, unused to such primitive yet effective tactics, were forced to flee, only to be picked off by human snipers and booby traps set along their escape routes. In another area, Sarah's team used a combination of captured alien artillery and homemade explosives to breach a heavily fortified alien bunker. The explosion tore through the structure, and the remaining Zetharians inside surrendered immediately. Throughout these battles, the Zetharians grew increasingly desperate. Their advanced technology, which had once given them the upper hand, now became a liability in the face of human adaptability. Power armor, drones, and energy weapons, tools that had been designed for intergalactic domination, became dead weight as Earth's resistance fighters found ways to disable or repurpose them. A species that had once seen Earth as a backwater, a primitive and insignificant planet, now faced utter humiliation at the hands of humans who had turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. The final days of the invasion saw the Zetharian fleet retreating, abandoning their ground forces as they attempted to escape Earth's atmosphere. It was a retreat born of panic, as Zetharian commanders scrambled to save what was left of their forces. Their once imperious warships, symbols of conquest across countless worlds, now limped away from Earth, battered and broken. The human counterattacks had decimated their fleet, leaving them no choice but to flee. Sarah and her team watched from the ground as the alien ships disappeared into the atmosphere, their glowing trails fading into the night sky. There was no cheer, no immediate celebration. The cost of victory had been steep. Cities lay in ruins, millions had lost their lives, and the scars of the invasion would mark the planet for generations. But humanity had survived. They had faced down the galaxy's most feared empire and emerged victorious, not because of superior weapons or overwhelming force, but because of their ingenuity, adaptability, and relentless determination to defend their home. In the aftermath, Sarah stood among the ruins of a once thriving city. Fires still smoldered in the distance, and the air was thick with the scent of ash and destruction. But even amid the devastation, there was hope. People were already beginning to rebuild, turning the rubble into the foundations of something new. The human spirit, unbroken, persisted. The Zetharians, who had once viewed Earth as just another conquest, had learned a bitter lesson. Supreme Commander Zal's final moments aboard the command ship were spent in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a species he had so thoroughly underestimated had defeated him. For all their advanced technology, the Zetharians had failed to understand the one thing that set humans apart: their ability to turn every obstacle into an opportunity, every tool into a weapon, and every challenge into a victory. As the survivors began to rebuild their world, there was a sense of unity that hadn't existed before the invasion. Humanity had been tested in a way it had never been tested before, and they had risen to the occasion. The Zetharians had underestimated them, just as many others in the galaxy had likely done. But now, the universe knew, humans were not to be underestimated. They had taken the worst the galaxy had to offer, and had fought back with everything they had. Sarah, reflecting on the war, knew that the Zetharians had only seen a fraction of what humanity was capable of. The invaders had been defeated not by humanity's most powerful weapons, but by their ingenuity and their refusal to give up. Everything had become a weapon in their hands, from the simplest tool to the most advanced piece of alien technology. And that, more than anything, was what made humans truly dangerous. The war was over, but the message had been sent. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. Humans had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their sheer will to survive. And as they began to rebuild, one thing was certain: no one would dare challenge Earth again, not after what they had done to the Zetharians. The invaders had panicked, because everything was a weapon to humans,